Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Fabrication Friday podcast. I'm your host, Joe Fairley, certified prosthetist, 3D printing enthusiast, and owner of Ascent Fabrication. Fabrication Friday is an all-around fun time where I talk about 3D printing applications, conduct interviews with industry leaders, and much more. Come join us every Friday for an informational discussion around the evolution of the additive manufacturing field and how we utilize various digital workflows and 3D printing methods in our daily work at Ascent Fabrication. All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Fabrication Friday. I'm your host, Joe Fairley. I'm the owner of Ascent Fabrication and 3D printing enthusiast, certified prosthetist as well. Today, we've got a very special guest on that I was just with this week down on Long Island, Mr. Mike Nadata, the owner and operator of New York Rehab and prosthetics and orthotics there. So we had a great time with them. They brought us in for our in-house training. So typically we go into someone's clinic or otherwise outside the prosthetics and orthotics realm to help with some installation and really in-depth training on a couple key 3D printers that either we have ourselves or we also support. So thank you very much, Mike, for taking time out of your morning here before your busy clinical schedule today. I appreciate it.
No problem. My pleasure.
Yeah. So, with the 3D printing that we went through the last couple of days earlier this week, I guess let's just start out with kind of a general, what's your background in prosthetics and orthotics, and then how did you get started in 3D printing?
Sure. So I'm a CPO. I believe I've been certified since 2003. So that's about 20 years. I wasn't great when I started. So I've been, I've had my own clinic since I would say last 19, 18 years of that. So I've run the business for a while, and I always knew that I want to get into CAD CAM. Even when I was in school and it wasn't anything that it is today, I was always fascinated by the CNC carving. I just thought it was a cleaner, more efficient way of doing things. Not that I don't love plaster and I don't love sculpting, and it's not, it hits the spot sometimes when you had a long day and you want to relax. But I always knew that was the future. And so I always felt that, one of my career goals would be to be able to afford and to operate one of these. And as we all know, a lot of this is cost prohibitive in the field, especially when you're starting out. So especially, the CNC carving and the scanners, right? Back in the day, you don't have these iPhone scanners or these structure scanners. They were $30,000, whatever they were, the Polhemus, I think they were, there was a lot of. So it wasn't something that anyone could just jump into. And as I kind of trotted along in my career and my business, I was fortunate enough to start employing some engineers and other consultants who were able to build us, for a lot cheaper, our own CNC carver. And we were able to, at one point, you're talking, I would say by around 2014, right? So it's still 8 or 9 years ago when this was, I guess 3D printing was still in its infancy.
Right.
Carving was out there, but again, to get a carver was $100,000 in those days. We were able to build a CNC carver for under $5,000 at the time. And a gentleman named Tom Carr, I'm curious if he's still out there. And he built it for us, and we tweaked it a little bit. And we I think at the time we were using CanFit. We were able to get them to, I couldn't outright pay for the software, so they leased it to us. I think we paid month by month. They gave us a scanner to try, the Spectrum scanner, I think it was called, and we evolved. As I started carving, we were doing a lot of orthotics and prosthetics, and it was a learning curve, there's no question. And we started playing with the structure scanner. as a more portable way of doing things. When we started with the spectrum scanner, it wasn't, it's a big thing, and we used to scan casts, outsides of casts.
Hmm.
And I had one guy who would just sit in a room all day, and he'd have a pile of AFO and whatever cast, and he'd just sit there in the dark, because I don't even remember how he used it, but he was scanning those casts. And then slowly we got into the structure scanners, and they had their benefits of being much more cost efficient, and doing a decent job of scanning. So we did a lot of work there, and then it was brought to my attention this idea of around 2014 of 3D printing, which I've heard the concept. I never could fathom in my mind what that means, that there is a printer that creates an object. And I had one clinician who was just, he said, that's the next step. You got to look into this 3D printing. And I said, okay. We went to the Jacob Javits Center. They had a 3D printing show. And I think I told you this when you were by my clinic. And I just went around to all, Ultimaker was there, and what's the other one we were just talking about? I keep forgetting the name now. They were a big player.
MakerBot, was that it? Now
MakerBot.
they've merged. They're now Ultimaker still, but MakerBot and
Oh,
Ultimaker,
seriously?
same company.
What?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So anyway, I mean, I saw these amazing, I remember I seen like Star Wars figurines and all these really cool things. And I would go around saying, okay, I need to make a prosthesis. It's got to hold somebody's weight. Can I look at this? Short break. Everything I would touch would literally crumble in my hands. And the technology fascinated me, but I was like, there's no way this is applicable right now. This is
Right.
tissue paper. So we trudged on. We kind of shelved that for a little bit. I remember following a company, Wasp, out in Italy for a while,
Yeah,
watching them, right? So they were using FDM. They still are. They're building houses now, I think.
yeah. Some of the
Um,
original Delta printers, right? Yeah.
yep. And I remember thinking, okay, and they, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, they have like an orthopedic side, or they did at one point even.
Hmm.
And they had a prosthetist who, I believe his workflow was, he was 3D printing PLA shells, and then a very thin shell, and laminating over that.
Okay.
Okay, interesting workflow, but a way in. I think I said, we got to just jump into this somehow. I need to get a printer, and we bought a Delta printer at one
Okay.
point, just to have it, just to learn from it.
Right.
And I don't remember doing much with it. I don't even know if we got it to work.
Yeah.
I don't even know the brand. Again, these things are expensive, or the real ones, the Stratuses. I'm not, wasn't that type
Yeah.
of position that I'm going to buy one of those big Stratuses, which again weren't necessarily. I should mute that. Wasn't in that league, but not that they would really do the job anyway.
Right.
What they call the Fortis? Did I make that up?
Yeah. No, that sounds about right.
Right,
Yeah.
those big printers, and everyone was
Huge.
talking about them, and
Yeah.
but the same day, at the same time, they're still printing PLA. It was still the
Right.
same, thing. It was 20 hours, and it was,
Yeah.
Z lines and Z layer, adhesion issues. So we had to get into it a little bit more. So moving forward, I had a string of engineers who just didn't know necessarily anything about prosthetics, but knew about whether it's robotics. I had 3D printing people, had CNC people, whatever it is. And slowly but slowly we came up with, I think we're going to have to make our own printer at this stage, because there's nothing out there. And I had heard that PDI was doing things with pellets, pellet extrusion. I was like, okay, that might be a little stronger.
Right. About what
And
time was that? Maybe 2016, 2018?
2016, I remember it exactly, because we moved into our present facility in 2016.
Okay.
And before our building was finished with the renovations, we had moved one of the iterations of pellet printers here. We actually got fined by the town, because they thought we were manufacturing here. We weren't manufacturing. It wasn't zoned. A whole to do.
Oh
We
my
had
goodness.
we had to go to a variance meeting, And I still remember a town resident got up and he said, "How do we know that they're not 3D printing weapons here
Oh
and
my
guns?"
goodness. Yeah.
And I was saying, "Well, we're making, prosthetic limbs." It passed. We were fine at the end, but just to
Right.
give you an idea, and I still remember telling them, like, you're concerned about what we're making, but your library down the street at that point had an FDM printer
Yeah.
in it, the public library. So
Right.
it's funny more than anything. It wasn't really much of a nuisance at the end, but
Interesting.
just to kind of throw that in there. So
Yeah.
what I liked about the pellet idea was that, there's one material that I was comfortable fabricating with, and that's copolymer plastic.
Hmm.
I just found it to be more of an indestructible material. And again, as prosthetists, as orthotists, we're one of our primary concerns is always the integrity of a device and the story. Will it support the patient? Not only will it do the job, but will it not crumble beneath them, causing, God forbid, more damage. So I always felt that copolymer was a good material.
Hmm.
um, and that's why I like the idea of pellet extruding, because, at the time, again, we're talking about there was PLA out there. Maybe there were these carbon fiber infused filaments, but maybe a little polypropylene. Again, these are all still not really going where we wanted them yet, but
Right.
I like the idea of fabricating directly what we would make our sheet plastics from,
Yeah.
right? And we knew
Yeah.
that the
Use the
stuff
same
was
material.
same materials. Literally, it's either going to go to a sheet form or it's going to go into a socket form.
Hmm.
Um, it was not an easy task. We had many iterations of the pellet extruder, um, but finally, and many iterations of the gantry system that would house it. And we made these monsters. We it was a real process. It was a real process.
Right.
But at the end, we got very comfortable, definitely fabricating TPU. We were, we like the idea of the inner flexible inner sockets that were always a uniform thickness, and that was that was a nice thing, because when you're pulling plastic, you can't promise uniform thickness.
Right.
Uniform thickness also means that you could retrofit other inner sockets in, because you can now quantify what you have. So it
Right.
helped us clinically when we were able to do that. Um, and then, on the copolymer side, um, again, and how I test things. We do the
Yep.
ultimate brake test.
I
It
love
never
it. Drive it over with your car. I love it.
drive it with my car, whack it with a mallet.
Yep.
Everyone's nobody's gonna have that in real life. Nobody's gonna do that in real life. I said, well, in the absence of real, testing equipment, we have to go to extremes. And if a device is going to survive an extreme, it'll certainly survive a day to day. Because we can't predict, all the little mishaps that can happen, besides just standing up and walking. So I never felt I got 100% there with copolymer. We were at the really at the height. We were 3D printing AFOs, KFOs even. We were able to do articulating AFOs, AKs and BKs. Were able to make the forms, but I never felt comfortable enough putting them on patients. You
Mhm.
know, and again, maybe I was to an extreme. Maybe my standards were too high, expecting them to be completely indestructible. But I just, again, as a person, I never got there. So we had a lot of, in theory, a lot of it was, you know we would see our patients, we would be doing fabrication normally. We would be using the carver. We would always use the carver the whole time. As we were using the carver, we were working on digital modification. So there's so many. I always say don't forget the CAD
Layers to it.
cam, right? There's always
Layers
everything.
to it.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of layers, and you got to keep up with all of them. And we're kind of getting better. And at one point, but again, I wouldn't say we were fully implemented. We had a lot of little things going in different directions. We're doing a lot of R&D, a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and we're always trying new scanners, and I showed you some of the equipment we used,
Right.
etc. And it almost sounds like you could write a novel on this, but
Yeah.
COVID hit. COVID hit, right? And that was the turning point for us, because when everything shut down and the world shut down, we, we still are in a lot, we service a lot of skilled nursing facilities, and they were all open. And the therapist will call us, the physical therapist, say, we need prosthetic limbs.
Hmm.
We weren't allowed in.
Right.
That's where, necessity is the mother of invention. We had all the tools at our disposal. We had the ability to um, shape capture. We had the ability to build CAD shapes. We had the ability to manufacture. Again, we couldn't even be in our building on top of each other. Luckily, we have a very large facility. So when we were able to get back in, we were able to distance us, from
Right.
everybody. But we all had a corner in this place.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember they were desperate. And I remember talking to my chief prosthetist. I said, we gotta roll out the CAD. We got to do it. And we started, I remember the first patient in the Bronx, where we Zoomed with the therapist. We were able to, with their help, take shape capture and measurements and so on, all through Zoom. And we were able to fabricate in-house. We used the CAD system. We 3D printed inner sockets. We really cranked, and we delivered to the door. Here you go, physical therapist. Here's your prosthesis.
Right.
I'll be in the car. Let's Zoom it, and I'll tell you what we're gonna do, and then come on
Right.
back, and I'll do an adjustment. And that was the first of hundreds of deliveries over COVID when everybody was shut
Wow.
down. We were it. We were going and blowing,
Yeah.
and we got better, and we got quicker, and we were very busy. We are busy, but that really started a resurgence, and it got us not only just using it theoretically, but we haven't stopped.
Right.
We haven't stopped, and that's where we are today, basically.
With that kind of transition from pellet printing and then COVID hitting, did you continue the pellet printing, or did you start with other printers? I know we worked on a few other printers there the last couple of days.
Yeah. So, at one point, um, we said to ourselves, um, that we hit the maximum we could do with the pellet printing, and they were fickle machines. It wasn't just, again, when you're running a business, it's also fun to play, but
Right.
you need dependency. You need repeatability. You need to know that you're setting a print, it'll be done, at the end of the day. Not that, and these printers, I mean, they were homegrown machines. I told you, I think even Autobach, the heads of Autobach came down at one point to see our printers.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and that wasn't even that long ago. But they were like, whatever the word is, not they were held together with chewing gum and spit, but
Sure.
they would
Yeah.
short. We'd have to change out thermistors, we'd have to change out the rolling wheels, whatever. And I'm not in, by the way, my part in all this is I don't even think I was allowed to turn the printers on. I still,
Right.
so I kind of sit back and marvel at what very intelligent people can do,
Yeah.
and my 2 cents, because it's easy to tell somebody else what to do besides doing it. So I can't even tell you half what was going on, but we would have issues with we had nobody to talk to about this either.
Right.
The prints clogging, and we'd have to take apart the extruders, and you'd find these big molten pieces of plastic, caught in there. We learned all about, drying, which again, we didn't have this information at the time.
Right. Yeah.
When we learned, hey, we're printing, in a lower level that's a little bit more humid, but yet we're keeping, hundreds of pounds of pellets in the garage. And
Right.
right when we switched to a new bag, we had no problems, but it was always in the mid-month, and it took
Yeah.
us time to connect the dots that these things
Sure.
were collecting moisture. So it was really the school of hard knocks. And there was just so many, we got to the point we had 4 very large, uh, 5 actually at the end of these printers going, but one was always down easily was down, maybe even 2.
Yeah.
And but they were going, and it was just, to me, I have to, I just couldn't. At one point it just got a little overwhelming. But we were really into the CAD, and we were able to, afford at that point, CAD sold itself to me. So I said before that a lot of the stuff is cost prohibitive, right? But it's cost prohibitive for 2 reasons. Number one, not everybody has 100 grand to shell out on
Right.
equipment. But number two, even if you did, and it's something you've never personally tried, it's not worth the money necessarily. How
Right.
do you know that you're going to get your $100,000 out? We're not multi-billion-dollar corporations that can
Right.
buy an MJF printer and say, oh, well, we can't use it. Okay, leave it in the corner.
Yeah.
Who cares? So to me, the CAD had to sell it to us. So at that point, our little $3,000 carver was also puttering away and barely,
Right.
and at that point, it was worth it to me to buy a real carver. We got ours from Medico Supplies, an incredible company.
Yeah.
I get paid for that little push. They're really great.
I
So
have
we
heard good things from Medico for sure.
they are. I highly recommend working with them. They're really upstanding people, and they make a great product. So at that point, the technology sold itself. So I wasn't afraid to put money down because I knew I was making it back. It wasn't even a question.
Right.
And we're just chugging along with again carving, but I kind of just put an end. What my last engineer had moved away from the state. He moved down, so to speak, the project had a natural end to it. But at one point, I heard, I'm trying to think. Must have been on LinkedIn, one of these videos. I'm not the biggest social media person,
Sure.
but I heard Derek Schmidt
Yep.
talking about these Sidewinder printers
Yeah.
and just getting you started. And at that point, it was just me and my technicians. We have no formal training in engineering or 3D printing or anything. It's like, you know what, for $300, whatever the cost was, just buy a printer. I've wasted a lot more on a lot less. And we were surprised at how great the quality was.
Hmm. Right out of the
Um,
box, no modifications
no
whatsoever.
modifications, no setting. I bought a $30 spool of TPU off of Amazon, and the same TPU we were printing inners all this time.
Yeah.
And that was, we were getting, I would say, even a better product. They were, you get to choose your, now it's neon green, and it was blue. Before they came out tan. We used to have to dye them with a
Uh,
master batch pellet. We would throw a couple of pellets into the mix so they come out black.
right.
It was like not an attractive color, the natural TPU.
Right.
At least, we were dealing with it. But the products were coming out better, easier, consistent. These printers were just humming away.
Hmm.
And then we were able to figure out, we met up with Arthur Hobden from OMP Digital Design.
Yep.
He helped us, with our fine tuning our CAD, using certain of his programs to offset the print. So again, we were back to that hybrid workflow, that Franken flow, whatever you guys call it,
Yeah. Frank.
where we're printing our inners and we're carving our outers,
Yep.
and just loving life. And that's basically where it got us to this stage. And we met with you, and we have other things in the mix now. We're obviously looking to eliminate the carbon aspect, and we'd love to get into. I still have my eye on a definitive socket, external socket, and we've done a lot of work. We like to call it the beast,
Right.
and that's where we've been 3D printing TPU, special type of TPU, with certain designs. Art had helped us build, and we're finding we're liking the first results. We're seeing great Z-layer adhesion, no delamination, very good stiffness of the material, and so far it's checking all the boxes, and we're excited to move ahead with that.
Yeah, it's been an interesting project, working on trying to get this FDM definitive socket, cracking the code. When I talk to other CPOs in the field, that's one thing that they'd really want to see. And for that one benefit of having something that's a lot more repeatable for a process and dependable, and then having it be cheaper and more cost effective due to just maybe labor costs. I think there's a huge benefit of trying to go down this route. And I've been pretty impressed by that. The design by Art, kudos to him. And then how far you've gotten so far with those settings before I came in. And I think it's always going to maybe take a little bit of tweaking here and there, right? But think we got to a nicer result. And would love to see, how that starts to go out on some patients and get their feedback from it. Um, with all of this transition that you've been through over the last, 8 to 10 years of being in 3D printing, I guess I've got two questions for you here. One, what advice would you give to other CPOs who are, thinking about getting into it themselves, dabbling in it? And then what have you seen has been the biggest benefit for you and your patients?
Good question. Um, there aren't as many excuses, if any, today as there were when I started. Today, you can get a comb scanner right on your iPhone. Will definitely do the job. It's one of the scanners we use here. And you can get a Sidewinder printer, and you will create things and you will make things. There's no financial risks anymore whatsoever. And you have a workflow with Mesh Mixer, for instance.
Yep.
Even the CAD programs, Art has his flow with ZBrush and Fusion. The outlay is minimal, so there is no financial risk. There's nothing which has to prove itself before you invest, because there's no investment anymore. It's really nominal. So I would recommend everybody just try a subscription to Comb. I think it's $250 for a few months, and with under $1,000 you're rocking and rolling. So and you have powerful tools. It's just not not a toy. Yeah, you got a powerful tool. So that's number one. What are the benefits I've seen? The benefits have evolved. When I started, and I would tell patients, we 3D print and so on, everybody, ooh and ah, it's amazing. It's the sound bite, right? Wow, 3D printing. And but I really couldn't tell them, what their benefit was. My benefit was, maybe the manufacturing speed, maybe I brought down my costs, reduced some lab errors, but like, what would the patient, other than maybe getting something that, was brought from concept to fruition, I couldn't really tell them, but because in the beginning we didn't have, let's say, the scanners and the equipment that we needed to really make sure that what we're getting is true. And that was one thing I learned early on. You can have all the cam you want. You can get to that 3D printing. You can do all that stuff, but if your CAD isn't right, if your shape capture, right, the beginning is not accurate, then you're just pie in the sky. Like, good luck to you, because you can make anything you want, that you may as well make a magic wand, because you're not making something that's going to fit or that's going to benefit the patient. So I would say what I've happily and been able to realize over the years of the evolution is, now I could look at a patient and say, we really can, within the millimeter, get precise measurements of you, and we can predict the fitting of a prosthesis. I can tell you, there's always going to be the exception, but 95% of the time, I know if I do my following steps, I know how my prosthesis is going to fit, and I know how my patient's going to react. End of story. And you can't get that by hand. You can't get that anything else. And then, so number one, the precision is there now. The precision, if you have a solid workflow that's consistent and repeatable, you not only can make something that's cool and make something that takes less time and to make, and maybe cheaper, may not be, whatever, but now you're offering precision to your patients, which at the end of the day is the clinical game changer. And then, of course, all the cool things you can do with it, all the on the fly. I have digital records of all my patients. I can go back, I can adjust, they call me, I have lots of patients who don't live in state, instead of them, them telling me they're wearing 15 ply socks, and they could come meet me, and we could shave off days. I could have something waiting for them based on what they're telling me on Zoom. There's so many ways to once you have that digital file, sky's the limit. It's only as good as your imagination.
Yeah. You'd mentioned you guys do a lot of retrofitting, and even printing out a couple different flexible linears, 3, 4, 5 millimeters, depending on that new amputees residual limb fluctuation. I think that's a great idea to be able to retrofit. those
That's right.
splinters, because who wants to wear 15 ply of socks, 20 ply of socks over their limb, and then their limb is moving all around inside that socket, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty nice and interesting benefit to having a bit more streamlined solution for that purpose. And um, the
But it
precision
also, yeah, I'm
is
sorry, you were
nice.
saying.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
just that precision and repeatability.
yeah, I was just going to say it also helps the patient because you're getting to a point where there's we're dealing with nobody wants to pay anymore, the issues of the payer. So
Yeah,
that patient who's in 15 ply socks and his insurance won't pay for a replacement socket right now,
yeah,
what am I going to do? Okay, for $30 or $60, I'll retrofit and print a tighter inner socket that
right,
fits just as good. You're back to where you are, and it'll give you more time, and you don't have to suffer. You can continue about your life. And you have a lot of great ideas. You were showing us your Vario Shore, I think, is an incredible product. I
yeah.
was just
Thank you.
to that. And again, that's the beauty of this now. Now, once you have the precision and you have the workflow, then the enhancements. Then it's not just you're doing what you've done for all these years with plaster and vacuum forming and lamination, and
Mhm.
you've just replaced it with machines. Now you're not just catching up, you're enhancing. And
Right.
that's where we're at now. That's what I think we're seeing in the field, enhancement of these devices, not just
Mhm.
another way of fabricating, a robotic way of fabricating, if you will. Okay,
Right.
cute. How's this helping the patient? Now I believe we're at the stage, the last few years, we're actually helping the patient, not just our bottom line or, our need to play with toys, something
Right.
like.
Yeah. No, these are certainly a little bit more than just toys now. And even at $300 for an artillery sidewinder, free software from Autodesk, Mesh Mixer, getting into that design side of things, free slicer softwares, like you said, it's, very low barrier to entry for people just to get started. And like you said, you bought one of your first 3D printers just to learn about it, right? So I think that step is pretty huge for people to start to just understand what FDM 3D printing is, what that workflow is like. How do you go from a 3D scan to a actual printable and fittable device, right? Um, and having your clinical expertise be transferred through that workflow, right? Because again, maybe some clinicians have, their very specific tweaks that they'd like to do on how a socket is fitting, and it's going to take a couple iterations for you to be able to translate those hand modifications into digital modifications. But like anything else, any other new technology, there's a little bit of a learning curve. But reaching out to the people that you've reached out to for some assistance, and doing a lot of the legwork on your own too, I commend you guys for, because really over the past 8-9 years, you guys have been really paving the way, honestly, for this 3D printing, going from pellet printing, and making your own printers, making your own carvers, and then out to having this fleet of 8 artillery sidewinders, is definitely an impressive feat. And just seeing the enthusiasm that you and your team have for it was definitely refreshing for me, coming in and working with you, Mark, and Brittany, and the rest of the team there at New York Rehab. Was awesome. Great time. Thanks for having us, and we're looking forward to seeing how much more you guys innovate, in this time alongside us, and seeing where that leads you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an exciting time. It's really great. And yeah, it was great having you. And that was the point. We love to learn. We don't profess to know everything. And I think we're also at the stage where we're all starting to share. We're unfortunately, OMP is a very secretive field. Nobody likes to
Mhm.
give out their secrets because they think that their competitors and put them out of business.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a shame, because if we would collaborate more, then we would all enhance what we're doing.
Right.
So, um, even now with the OMP and so on, like, if I'm sure if all of us in the 3D printing world got together, OMP 3D printing world, and said, let's figure out a real definitive socket. Don't get me started on MJF.
Sure.
uh, but a real definitive strong socket that we can all sleep well at night, we would have it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
maybe we will now. I think
There's
there's not enough of us out there yet doing this, and there should be more. and
Right.
only we can all benefit, the clinicians, the patients, the technicians. At the end of the day, you give out good technology, you help people, everyone's going to win. People worry about the technicians. I always say you're not going to the technicians aren't going to be out of a job. They're going to have
Right. Yeah.
different job description.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
that's
that's one
critically
big thing
important.
that people bring up, honestly, and it's a shame too because I've talked with other clinicians recently that are describing to me that the technical schools are just going away. There's very few technical schools now for P&O, and we're losing them. And I do agree with you that we're not exactly getting rid of a technician. The job description is changing a little bit.
Mhm.
But like any field that is going through any kind of change in technology, there's always going to be different people being brought in, and those people who are in the field now learning new skills, right? So some people are a little bit more not as responsive to that than others. So I get why they're so apprehensive. However, you have to have an open mind and be able to collaborate, in this respect in order to succeed in 3D printing in general. There's a lot of this knowledge base that doesn't exist yet. That's partly why, I've been so focused on this with Ascent Fabrication. So, that's kind of that mantra that we live by for our training, either virtual and or, coming in house is we want to make sure that we know what you want to print and what you're passionate about to be able to, be successful with that and long term, right? This is a now an ongoing relationship that we'll continue to work with you to keep pushing these boundaries because this is just scratching the surface, right? There's so much more that we can do with this to enhance some of these designs and continue to create more benefits for the patients specifically and us in the background too. So definitely appreciate this collaborative relationship that you guys have with us.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's exciting, and look forward to the future.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for your time, Mike. I know you've got a busy, clinical schedule coming up today, so I won't hold you any longer. But thank you very much for those insights. Those are extremely valuable. I'm sure people are going to get some little tidbits of information out of that. If you are open to, talking with anyone, one on one, how could someone get in touch with you?
I guess they could email me. My email is mike@nyrehab.net.
Yeah.
Feel free to email me. Absolutely.
So
My pleasure.
we'll put that in the show notes there and make sure that if you do have any just general questions like we've discussed here with Mike about how to get started or just general people that we should be talking to, we can definitely get you in touch with Mike or myself. But thanks again, Mike. I appreciate it. This has been a great insight to the P&O side of 3D printing and the evolution over the past 8-9 years. So happy Fabrication Friday, everyone. Hope you got a couple good tidbits out of that, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
All right, thanks for having me.